Why is it so difficult to show a list of items in an Android app? I have no idea. But if you stick with me to the end of this video, you will have a phenomenal understanding of how to set up the Recycler view. The first thing you need to do is figure out where you're going to be getting your data from. Is this going to be from an external server? Is it going to be from a database that's stored locally on the user's device? You need to figure where that data is going to come from so you can show it onto your Recycler view. For me, I just created this fake repository object, which is going to, I guess, kind of represent a network call. And for this video, we're going to be displaying a list of molecules and their various properties. So what I did was define this fake repository object, and in here we have the molecule name, the 3-letter and 1-letter abbreviation, along with the structure. And the structure just has a corresponding drawable resource file, so you can take a look at this here for alanine. And then each molecule property is labeled with a molecule ID, and this is just an enum class with the molecule's name. I should also mention that if you want to follow along, you can go down to the description. There should be a link to the GitHub starter code, which is going to start you off right here with exactly what I have if you want to just follow along, and we'll have the final source code there available for you as well. But now that you have your data, or at least you know where you're going to get the data from, the next thing we have to do is set up our layout files. So let's go over to the activity main, or wherever you want your Recycler view. I'm just going to delete this hello world. I'm going to come over to the far left into the palette section. I'm going to click this little search button and type in RecyclerView. And then we can see we get the RecyclerView here. I'm going to take it, drag and drop it onto the little canvas here, and then add constraints to the top, bottom, left, and right. And then finally, I'm going to give the RecyclerView an ID so we can reference it later. So layout number 1 is completed. The next one we have to create is one for each of our RecyclerView rows. So if you take a look at the example, what I mean by this is we need to create a layout file that's going to contain an image view along with 3 text views. So I'm going to go over to the far left, come down to the resources folder. I'm going to go to layout, right click on this folder, new layout resource file, and I'm just going to call this RecyclerView row. And then I'm just going to hit OK, and it should create a new layout resource file for us. And then once this file is created, I'm going to go over to split, and then instead of a constraint layout being the outermost tag, I'm going to make this a CardView using the Android X library. And then I'm going to go back to design. I'm going to drag and drop a constraint layout within this CardView. And then from here, I'm going to drag and drop in the image view along with the 3 text views. Now that we have all of the views within our component tree, I'm going to rearrange them within the constraint layout so they look the way I want them to. All right, so I finished setting up this layout. What I'd like to do is go over some of the major aspects of this layout. The first one is this guideline that I added in. This just ensures that the image view only takes up about 25% of the entire row. The next thing that I did was add names for each of these views. So the image view has an ID of structure, and then we have full name, 3-letter and 1-letter abbreviation for the corresponding text views. The next thing that you should take note of is the bottom margin and that the card view is wrap content. Now, why is this important? If you take a look at the example here, this margin bottom 10 dp is going to be the space in between each of our rows. Without that, each of our rows are going to be pressed against each other. The wrap content is needed because if that wasn't there, alanine, this row right here, would take up the entire page. I would scroll down an entire page and then we would see arginine. So make sure you have wrap content for both your card view and your constraint layout, and you have some margin at the bottom of each of your rows. But now that we have this completed, we're then going to create a data class that's going to bundle up all the data that we extracted from a repository and then pass that over into our adapter. To create this data class, come over to the far left. We're going to right click on our basemmost folder here, new, come down to Kotlin class/file. We're going to go data class, and I'm going to call this molecule. When creating this data class, you need to consider the views that you added into your row layout. So in my case, I have 4 views that we need to populate with data. We have this image view and the 3 text views. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to type in val name, and this is going to be of type string. This is going to represent the string that's going to be set to this text view here. So I'm going to do the same thing for the 3 and 1-letter abbreviations. And then finally, we have a image view, and to set the correct drawable resource to that, we need to store the drawable ID. So that's an integer type, so we're going to go val structure :integer. Now to ensure that we don't receive some random integer and then we actually get a drawable resource ID, I'm going to annotate this with @drawable resource. All right, so now that we have all this preliminary work completed, we now get to work on the fun part, the adapter. So let's come over to the far left and let's create a regular old class. We're gonna go new, come down to content class and file, leave this as class, and I'm just gonna call it my adapter. Hit enter, and then we should be presented with something very similar to this. Now, what I want you to do is just kind of bear with me over the next minute or so. What we're going to do is set up the basic RecyclerView Adapter skeleton. So this is going to include the inner class and the various methods required for implementing the adapter class. So the very first thing you're going to do is come into the My Adapter class, and you're going to type in inner class. I'm going to call this item view holder, and then this inner class is going to take in a view. So type in view, view, and then we're going to inherit from the RecyclerView.viewHolder, and we need to pass in this view that we were given right here. I'm going to import this with Alt-Enter, and then the open closing squiggly brackets. So now that we have this inner class, we're going to come back up to our MyAdapter class, and then we're going to inherit from the RecyclerView.Adapter. We're going to pass in the MyAdapter.ItemViewHolder. This is just our inner class here. And then we need to add open closing parentheses here because this class has a constructor. So now that we have this, we're going to come over to the red squiggly line here. We're going to go implement members, Control A, and hit enter. So here is the base skeleton for a RecyclerView Adapter. So now that we have the base skeleton for a RecyclerView Adapter, this is great and all, but what is the purpose of each of the methods and the inner class? And I think that's the question that I'd like to answer in this video is what do we do in each of the methods and why do we do them? So I'd like to go over the what do we do in each of the methods and the inner class. And starting with the inner class, what we're going to do in here is grab a reference to each of the views that we defined within our RecyclerView row layout. So that's within here. We're going to have a variable that's going to go out and find this particular view and store it in a variable that we'll have access to throughout these methods. So I'm always pretty hesitant to describe it like this, but it's kind of like the onCreate method in an activity, and you'll see that later on we'll be using the findViewById and storing the result of that within a variable. The next method that we got is the onCreateViewHolder. Now in here, this is just where we're inflating the layout onto some view. That's all we're doing in here is inflating a layout, pretty simple. Next, we have the onBindViewHolder, and within here, all we're doing is assigning values to the views that we extracted based on the position given to us by the adapter. And then finally, we have this getItemCount method, and all this is just returning the total number of elements that we have to display within our RecyclerView. Now that we know what we do in each of the methods, let's go over a little bit of the theory as to what's happening in the background of the adapter so we know why we do them. So let's go over to this blackboard that I set up. And as you can see here, we have a bunch of rectangles. Let's just pretend the blue rectangle is our phone. And we're going to pretend each of the pink rectangles represents a row. Now, what happens when the user first loads up the activity? Well, our adapter is going to populate the RecyclerView with enough rows to fit on screen. So in this case, the adapter is going to populate our RecyclerView with 7 rows. Now, let's pretend the user wants to scroll down a little bit. So let's say they start from the bottom and go up. What's going to happen? This top row right here is going to come off screen, right? So this is going to be scrapped. And the only part of this process that we care about is the view isn't totally destroyed. So once it goes off screen, it's going to kind of sit in this little pile here. And then as the view eventually comes back on screen, right? So they're scrolling bottom up. So a view is going to come back onto screen. This is going to be our binding process. Now, what do we do in our binding process? This is where we update the values that were previously displayed on the row. So in this case, let's pretend we had alanine here. Let's say as we're scrolling, we now want this to say arginine. So instead of completely destroying this view here, we're just going to update the value. So the main takeaway from this is once the RecyclerView is first loaded, it's going to be populated with an initial set of views. And then as those views go off screen, instead of completely destroying them, those values are just going to be updated. So now that we have a general understanding of the purpose of the adapter, let's go back over to Android Studio and start writing some code to implement this process. I always like starting with the inner class, so this is where we'll start. Now in here, remember, we need to get a reference to each of the views within our row. So to do this, we're going to type in val, we're going to get the name. So this is going to be this text view right here. So val name, this is going to be of type text view, and we're going to set this equal to the view.findViewById. And then all we have to do is pass in the ID. So we go r.id.fullname. And then I'll alt enter this. And if you take a look, we have full name here, come back, histidine, full name. So let's go back and get a reference to the other three. So val, 3-letter abbreviation, again, it's going to be a text view. The view.findView by ID, r.id.3-letter abbreviation. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the next one. And then we have the structure, which is an image view. So I'm going to go structure is going to be of type image view. And then it's the same thing, view.findView by ID, r.id.structure. Beautiful. So now we have the views we defined within our layout, our row layout, within our adapter class. Now that we have a reference to each of our views within our layout, you might be asking yourself, where did this view come from? Well, this view came from the onCreateView holder. Now take a look at this. The onCreateView holder returns a type of item view holder, which is just our inner class. Now, within here, we're going to inflate the row layout, so this guy right here, onto a view, and that view will be passed into the constructor of our inner class. So let's write some code in here to clear that all up. So we're going to go val inflated view is going to be of type view. This is going to equal a layout inflator dot from the parent dot context. So that was given to us here. And then we're going to go dot inflate. And then all we have to do is pass in our row layout. So r dot layout dot r RecyclerView row. And then we're going to pass in parent and false because we don't want to attach it to the root. And then like I said, all we have to do is return an instance of the item view holder, and then we're going to pass in that inflated view. So that's how our item view holder can get access to the specific views defined in our layout here. Let's now implement the onBind view holder, but before we could do that, we need to take in a list of the data we'd like to display in our recycler view. So if you remember, we have this data class called molecule, which bundles up all that data for a specific row. So let's go over to my adapter, type in private val, I'm going to call it data, and this is just going to be a list of type molecule. So here is our data list, right? And then we're in the onBind view holder, we can unpack all of that data and populate it to the corresponding view. So we're going to type in val, I'm going to call it molecule. That's going to be of type molecule. And then I'm going to extract that from our list of data based on the position given to us by our adapter here. So now that we have that molecule, we can update that row with the correct values. So we can type in holder.name.text and set that equal to the molecule.name. So what is this holder? The holder is given to us in the constructor, but take a look, it's of type item view holder, our inner class. And within here, we have access to the text view holding the name of the molecule. Now, if I made this private and came down here, we wouldn't have access to this, right? Because it's not exposed. So make sure you keep these non-private, they're public. And then I'm going to go through and update the correct values for each of these views here. And then finally, the last method we need to implement is the getItemCount. This is the easiest one to do. We're going to type in return, and then we're just going to do our data.size. So just the size of our data set that we passed in. And just like that, you are finally done with the adapter class. Now let's do a really broad overview of what's happening here. When the recycler view is first loaded up, the onCreateView holder is called to populate the recycler view with its initial set of rows. Now, as the recycler view is being populated by this method here, it's going to return a type of item view holder, which stores a reference to these views contained within our row layout. Now, as those views come back on, remember they're not completely destroyed, rather they're updated in the binding process. This view holder that was created by the onCreateView holder is going to be passed into this method here. And then since we made these fields public, we have access to them and we can change their values to the corresponding position within our data set. And taking a look at this, this should be one abbreviation. So looking at this, we should be good to go to attach this adapter to our recycler view. Let's now navigate over to main activity, and in here we can grab a reference to our recycler view. So I'm going to type in val RecyclerView. This is going to be of type recyclerView. Set this equal to the findView by ID, r.id.the best recycler view on the planet. So now here what we need to do is assign our adapter. So we're going to RecyclerView.adapter. Set that equal to an instance of my adapter. And remember, my adapter takes in the list of data. So this is a list of type molecule. And some of you are probably going to be upset about this, but I wrote some methods that take care of this for me. So I have create data here, and this just returns that list of molecules. Now, the reason I'm not showing you how to write this yourself is because everyone's data set is going to be vastly different than mine. So there's really no way to generalize this. You just need to write a method that can pass in the required list. So now that we have that, there's one last thing we need to do is set a layout manager to a recycler view. So we're going to go RecyclerView.layoutManager is going to equal a linear layout manager, and we just have to pass in this context. So this. And that should be it for the recycler view. And if you're curious about what this layout manager is, all it is just telling Android Studio that we want to show our rows in a top to bottom layout. There's other ones. You could do like a grid layout. You could do a horizontal layout. You just need to look around in the documentation for those specific use cases. Now for the moment of truth, let's see if I made any mistakes. So we're going to click the play button to run the emulator. And this loads up and it looks like everything's working. We get all the way down to valine. Yeah, it looks like all the molecules are here. If you're looking for a video that shows you how to respond to user click events for a specific row, take a look at my video on that topic here. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.